Very good evening to all of you. Hi, WG and all, yeah. Okay, so you have received the material, and today will be the last part 3 of the indirect wealth. Then we have completed one circle. We have completed one cycle of the elements. Now, as you complete one cycle of the elements, and let us, of course, go back to a bit of a refresher into all the 5 elements. And this is just a little bit more of the cuff as you try to remember the elements. Now, one way to conceptualize as we look into the philosophy or the attitude or the behavior of the day master across the 4 elements other than the self. If you can put them into the timeline, we have the day master producing the output, and the output producing the wealth, and the wealth producing the officer, and the officer producing the resource. Now, as we look at this part here, we can also see one angle to help you to conceptualize better is you can try to imagine that the value system of the output, the value system and the thinking of the output stars, they are akin to children. They are akin to children. And in a way, you can say that according to one renowned psychologist, Sigmund Freud, where he also mentioned that the 3 psychological manifestation is our id, our ego, and our superego. And you can also see that output. Now, what are the 2 output stars that we know? The 2 output stars that we know is EG and hurting officer. And so output stars are energetic, just like children. Imagine children, if you bring a small child, 5 to 6 years old, bring the person into a park, you can see that the person would run around. Therefore, output stars are energetic, like a child in a park. You can find that EG and hurting officers are creative. They think out of the box. They are very curious. They are inventive, just like children, just like babies. When they walk around, at the early stage, whatever that they are able to grab, they like to put into the mouth. They like to test. So eating God likes to eat. Therefore, eating God enjoys eating, curious, explorative, wants to know. Hurting officer. Therefore, output stars have that psychological build-up akin to a children. So that is why when we say hurting officer that is not controlled by the resource, can tend to throw tantrum, like a Karen, the Karen effect. Therefore, hurting officer tends to throw tantrum, tends to rebel against it, just like children, just like the thinking. Now, not to say that output stars are childish, but when we look at it from a negative point of view, that they are childish, because their psychological pickup is it. So it means it, in terms of Sigmund Freud would be then, whatever I want, I take. I want it now. What I want it now. That is the build up, just like children, just like babies. When they're hungry, they cry. When they want things, they want it now. And therefore, output comes into it. And so just like children, innocent. So children sees things in black and white. Children, when they fantasize, they see things like heroes are good and the bad people, the villains are pure evil. Therefore, it's either you're good or you're bad. Whether you're evil or you are good. So therefore, there are no nuances, there are no balance, and that would be mostly the thinking of the output as well. And so therefore, that would be the way we look at it. Now, as we come to wealth, wealth is somewhat similar to a teenager, somewhat similar to a young adult, And as a young adult, ego, so ego represents the importance of the person's image, importance of the person's thinking. So therefore, that's where the wealth star is about 2 things. just like young people, the two things, one is their career, one is making money, accumulating resources. So that's what they want. And so they accumulate resources either through direct wealth or indirect wealth. And so money and sex, because young adults also consider procreation, try to attract, because they want to increase their mating prospects. Therefore, wealth stars are people who want to increase their mating prospects. They want to be in control. Therefore, that's what the wealth stars tend to be. Now we come to officer. Officer is the star that restrain the day master. And in terms of Sigmund Freud's concept of psychology, superego. So superego understands that the consequences of getting what you want. You cannot just go and grab what you want. You cannot just throw tantrum and spin on the floor like a young child, demanding that you get served what you want. You got to plan for it. You got to be patient. Therefore, the officer star restrain the day master. Therefore, as you look into the officer star, you look at it from your direct officer and your servant kidding. Therefore, that is mostly perhaps more at the elderly stage, more at the older adult, or the more mature adult, more of a mature adult. And therefore, in a way, you can also say officer means title. Officer means promotion. Sometimes when you read it, officer means the escalation in office. Therefore, as it is. And perhaps resource, which is commonly known to be one of wisdom, one that talks about knowledge, one that maybe talks about the elder. Nobleman. So the nobleman is in the resource star. And the resource star, of course, comprise of your direct resource and your indirect resource. And therefore, that's where we can see that people who have resource are people who are more slow. That's why when I say the more resource that you have, the slower you are. And one reason why you're slow is because you overthink. Because the older you are, the more you have seen, the more conflicts you have seen, the more fights, the more of every event. And as you go through many more events, you begin to see both sides of both sides, and then therefore you do not be quick to jump into conclusions. So you take your time. So that's where resources are very slow, output are very fast, and therefore that's where along the line we can see one whole cycle, so to speak. And so right now, as we look into wealth, as we try to again come to the indirect wealth, the wealth star that is highly sought after by many, especially indirect wealth, because wealth star is then money without work, money that is leveraged, and wealth star comes abundantly. Now let's take a look into wealth star. What happens if it is missing? And wealth star, if it is embedded in your graveyard, as you come into it. All right, so let's continue to where we would have stopped last. Let's move on to coming to indirect wealth in graveyard tombs. Now, as usual, as we look into the natal chart of somebody, we would like to see peach blossoms. Peach blossoms represent the peak of the element. Therefore, the peach blossom stars are favorable, but not too many. How many peach blossom stars would you want to see in your chart? How many would you like to have in your chart? And therefore, peach blossom stars normally, yes, that's right. One. One is just good enough. Anything more than one, you are going to have a triangle relationship. All right. So peach blossom star, one. That would be great. Anyone? That's what we want. And grove stars would be good. And graveyard stars are not too favorable. If you look into the clashes and the bullying punishment, and you can find that the graveyard stars are the earth branches. They are very often wrought with issues. And therefore, as you look into the graveyard, that's where usually you'll find that there are some sort. Now, once again, as I go through this chart, these are just extreme examples. Of course, we know that many of us have graveyard stars. I do have as well. And so usually can say that perhaps all of us have that tendency, have that ability if somehow our environment has nurtured us to be that, nurtured. So therefore, we look at it from a potential point of view. Okay, so indirect wealth represents money and sex. Therefore, indirect wealth, when it is weak, when it is so-called, when it is so-called, when so-called unfavorable and becomes a harmful god, it may denote one thing. Now, indirect wealth also means father. So the father of the day master, this will be for both genders. Then, of course, indirect wealth means girlfriend or basically sexual partners for the male. But nowadays, we also be careful because, women today in this 21st century have greater opportunities to come out to work, come out to be independent. Therefore, they also tends to carry on the ability to want control as well. Therefore, we don't assign the female to just direct officer to be the husband star, yeah, in the area. What happens if they too want to be in control? Yeah, this also be for also can denote for female day masters who like their own gender as well, because they want to be in control. It could be right as well. So anyway, the idea is that indirect wealth is that if you have the desire to be in control, to be desire to accumulate materials and resources. Therefore, that would be one thing to denote. Okay, so anyway, here we want to read if it is unfavorable, if it is in the tomb of a graveyard. But of course, be careful, terms and conditions apply. We are referring to graveyards that are unfavorable, graveyards that are weak, graveyards that may denote the kind of, no, so not all graveyards. And then we have to see the season and whether it's protruded or otherwise. But in a way, every time there's a graveyard star, that's where we want to refer to the tomb. So as you look into this person's chart, where's the graveyard? Where's the graveyard pillar, the graveyard branch? So you can see that the graveyard branch would be on the year pillar, in the branch of the goat, and so that's where we see the tomb. Okay, and so here we find that this is a sin day master, a very, very strong sin day master in a way, born in autumn, and sitting on fret. Therefore, this is Sinyo. Sinyo is like a knife, like a very sharp blade, like a pair of scissors. Therefore, this very fierce kind of pillar actually. And therefore, this is a Sint day master born in the growth style of the monkey. Therefore, metal is very big. So if metal is very big, we then find that goat, which is the end of summer, is actually weak. So you find that this graveyard branch is weak. So you find it's weak. So once weak, then any element that is in the tomb, any element in the tomb would then be red has. Be red has somewhat some issue that we must concern ourselves with, one way or the other. If you can recall, if it is resource, it can remember if we talk about resource, direct resource, what was the problem? How do we read direct resource? We read the mother, the mother issue. Therefore, here we find that is indirect wealth. It may be the father this time. It may be abusive father, because indirect wealth is father and it is void. Therefore, the influence is negative because this is a weak graveyard. Therefore, metal comes into it. And not only that, do we find indirect wealth in any other location? Is it protruded? Is it supported? That may be the case. And what fits the wood? This is a ye wood indirect wealth. What fits the wood? Well, water. That's right. Very good. We'll see that water fits because here, and this chart doesn't seem to have water, and except from the hurting officer. So that's why indirect wealth needs output. It needs output stuff. So they need this kind of rainwater. They can provide it as well. So that's one thing that we would like to consider. So anyway, we do find that this chart is overwhelmingly metal. Metal is very, very strong. You'll find metal here, metal day master, metal here, and metal here. And so with metal, we also have wood, earth producing metal. So therefore, we also find that there's earth producing metal. Okay, so in a way, we can find that the resource and the day master are overwhelmingly strong. Therefore, to counterbalance, we'll find that whether these are favorable day master. Okay, so in a way, you can then say that this is a void indirect wealth hidden in the graveyard. So it might be expectedly to find that abusive father could be red, and of course, the any perverted mental issue may be due to abusive father, or may be due to wealth, money, or due to sex, or due to that part. And therefore here, one may know that he has a history of a violent alcoholic father, and the father would bring back prostitutes from time to time, and that would be where he has his formative years has been influenced by that. And of course, this was a very well-known person who has been convicted uh, for such crime related to. Okay, now let's take a look into yet another one. You'll find that we have William Bonnet. We'll also see that this is also convicted for the related area. So now once again, we'll have to look into the chart and then consider where is the graveyard. And we find that there are two graveyards. One is in the dock, one is in the ox. And we'll find that the ox would then be one where the indirect wealth that is here, and indirect wealth that is here, which is also protruded. Also protruded. So here we'll find that this will be winter. So the day master is fire, born in winter, would be weak, slightly rooted, and the rooting is in the tomb. The rooting is in the tomb of the dog, which is autumn, which is also a very weak element. So we find that the graveyard is weak. The graveyard is weak. Both the graveyards, one way, we find that the dog would be in a way a very weak. So we have a very weak day master at this time, and then with the indirect wealth protruded. Okay, now there's many things to read, of course, but we do find. Now, as I was mentioning about people who may have this issue of crime, later, of course, when we go into rock wealth, we might also find similar. So I might as well just mention now, if this part is rock wealth, the reading is similar. So whether it is indirect wealth or it is rock wealth, we can then also find that the potential reading will be people who may have this tendency to commit crime. Okay, but here I just highlight the extreme. These are very, very extreme illustrations. Don't mean to say that, of course, you will be meeting a lot of all these charts. So don't go jumping on to start predicting that the people that you meet will also be of similar nature. But of course, as you read more of this chart, you can just perhaps say that this kind of day master may be very, very more occupied about this issue than normal. They're just more occupied. And so this is where if they can remedy it, they can try to overcome it, that might be better, because otherwise that might be the downfall of that person, especially when it's protruded or clashed out. Okay, so of course for indirect wealth, this will be more for a male problem, male related. Because anyway, if you see that the graveyard star, if it is indirect wealth, then they might be thinking about it, they might have this urge, or they might have just this tendency feeling, and this might be their source of frustration, and they don't know how to control themselves. And of course, again, this is just potential, just inclination towards it. So if we can find remedies to it, then we can at least help them to become better versions of themselves. Now, besides just looking into this, we can also see another chart. This is by Bernard Madoff. This guy is one that is on the FASA, a direct resource, direct officer chart. But as you go deep into it, you'll find once again the graveyard star. And the graveyard star this time, well, you'll find it in the storage rather than in the tomb of the dragon. Therefore, this person is born in the month of February, in the month of the dragon. And this is a sin metal. Therefore, it's weak, trapped, unrooted. So we have a very weak day master. A very weak day master with also, in a way, a very strong indirect wealth. Strong indirect wealth, weak day master with strong indirect wealth tends to make the person greedy. And when we have this, of course, the other element is to consider that the one, if it's manifest in a graveyard, it may also brings out the unfavorable part. Therefore, money related would mean scammers, swindler, cheater. This may also be where the person may be prone towards it as well. Right. So anyway, that would be just some of the readings. The question here, of course, is when indirect wealth is in graveyard. What if we find them in graveyard? Okay, now to the next part, we now come into financial forecasting. As we go through to a particular book, which is very popular. And so here in this particular book, we want to consider how to read a person's chart and to see whether person is rich or otherwise. And therefore here, we'll consider that I think we have shared this many times before. I think this is something that almost all of you would know by now, due to the sharing that we have done, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And so this is where, once again, how do we foretell that a person will be wealthy? And therefore, in the ancient books, the person will be wealthy when the wealth energy flows through the doorway. So how have the people interpreted wealth through the doorway? What does it mean? And of course, it would mean that the wealth is protruded at the step. Therefore, we consider this to be the doorway. To consider this to be the doorway. So now let's take a look into this individual, the Sultan of Brunei, the first and the present. And this person has a direct wealth side by side, which of course means amongst the wealthiest. And we do find that the person has direct wealth here, and the person sits on indirect wealth. Person sits on indirect wealth. So this indicates that the person has both the direct wealth and indirect wealth. It comes into it. All right. Next, we find Michael Bloomberg. Michael Bloomberg has been, according to Forbes, the 10th richest person in the world. And we also find that where would he has his indirect wealth. So indirect wealth will be here and also will be here. Therefore, again, it has been mentioned that if you find indirect wealth at the doorway, then you'll be one of the richest in the world. And interestingly, this person by the name of Michael Bloomberg also have what we call the fire trinity. How do you have the fire trinity? Well, this one, like playing poker, you have the royal flush. The fire trinity is when you have what? You have your yin, wu, shi. Therefore, you have all together the fire trinity combined together. And fire, what is fire to? What is fire to the earth day master? Fire will be the resource. So therefore, tremendously very strong in resource, very strong in wealth. Therefore, this chart has very strong fire, very strong water comes into it. All right. So as we look into it, let's now move on into how one can read. So as I tried to Google, I went to Google to find out top richest people on earth. I tried to find a few of them who have wealth chart missing, but somehow I just get a lot more of them who does have the indirect wealth protruded into the stem. So you find that many of them has this formation. So go do your own research, go and search for richest people in the world, and you'll find that they do have the indirect wealth side by side with their day stem. Therefore here we have an indirect wealth sitting on an indirect wealth. So indirect wealth sitting on an indirect wealth, and we have a very strong syn metal pillar again. Therefore, the pillar is very strong and fierce, and so is the indirect wealth. So a pure metal pillar side by side with a pure wood pillar. So indicating that making money, and of course again, every time you have indirect wealth, what must you look for? You must look for eating god. Therefore here there is a flow, that the eating god producing the wealth. So water producing the wealth representing. And this water, of course, is somewhat rooted. So you find a rooted eating god to an indirect wealth. This would be Larry Page. So Larry Page, one of the co-founders of Google, 6th richest person on earth. That's it. Very good chart. All right. Okay. So that's where wealth energy flows through the doorway. That is one part to consider. One part to consider. And now here, as we look into indirect wealth, there are now 30 rules. 30 rules, and we only got 1 minute each. So we try to see what are the rules and to see each one of them, yeah, as it is. Okay, so now here we want to consider what happens if your chart is missing. Does it mean that if your chart has missing wealth, there will be no potential at all? So again here, we'll see that there are what we call hidden potential. So even though the chart has no, it has a hidden potential. And we'll find that the what should be the readings that we have, and what are the signs that we need to consider. Okay, so now here, as we look into some of the rules, I'll just go through some of the rules that we have and try to pick up where we have gone through. A few things that we already have done so already. Let's move on to rule number 7, for example. Rule number 7 indicates that when we have health, or when we have wealth chart, or even if we don't have wealth chart, what is very crucial is output. Therefore, making money requires either the wealth chart or the output chart. Therefore, that would mean whether the hurting officer or the eating god are prominent in the chart. Therefore, we do denote that the wealth will then flow smoothly. Because here we consider that eating god and hurting officer are the essential ingredients to produce wealth. And what happens if the eating god is weak? Or what if it is weak? If it is weak, then what we would want to consider is then to measure that if the day master is strong and the resource element is strong. Therefore, and both the eating god and wealth can be in supportive position. Wealth can also be acquired. And so normally here we again we want to map out on the chart that number 1, if the chart has wealth. So again, what we would like to see from the earlier, what we would like to see, like some of the charts that we saw just now, we have Larry Page, where you have indirect wealth, and you have eating God. Therefore, this is a very good formation. Eating God, people see you as a creative artist, somebody who can write scripts, songwriter, and so on, and then you produce indirect wealth. But what happens if you don't have indirect wealth and your eating God is weak? And therefore here, if that's the case, then we want to consider output. Where is your output? So a very strong output, a favorable strong output with a strong day master can also be one star to generate wealth the same. Therefore, that's where we want to look at it. Now, in the absence of output, then resource star would be essential. We can find that the resource star would be fine. And the resource star would be best if it is in the hour pillar. Resource star would be in the hour pillar. In the absence of output, then the resource star would be present in order to then produce the day master. So if the day master is strong and the resource is strong, therefore that's where also we can find the ability to generate wealth. This is from rule number 7. Rule number 7, rule number 8. Rule number 8. It comes into it. In other rules that comes in, the rules comes in, of course, if that in a strong day master and the officer element is weak. The officer element is weak, but the resource element is strong. So here comes again where to facilitate the particular element. And so the resource is strong with the officer element that is weak. The rationale for doing this or saying that is because officer star weakens wealth. Officer star weakens wealth. And therefore, if the officer is weak, therefore the element for officer would not weaken the wealth so much. And if the resource element is strong, then we can find that the wealth can control, the wealth can control the resource, thus indicating that the wealth can then be acquired. Okay, so one can see that one of the presents would be your resource element, the resource element, especially in the absence of wealth. So we do consider that there's a clash between wealth and resource, and so therefore, in the absence of wealth, the resource, if it is strong, will then be able to attract wealth to come in. So that's the reading for according to this chapter of this book, as it is. All right. So again, rule number 10 is quite a bit of a combination from the earlier one, where once again, if the wealth is missing, so we can find the presence of hurting officer and also presence of resource. And this one comes from our previous element sharing, because when you have hurting officer, you would like to find having resource, because resource controlling hurting officer. Resource controlling hurting officer is like an elderly or a nobleman providing education to the hurting officer. Therefore, the hurting officer will be more refined, controlled, because when you see hurting officer, you should see resource. And so in the absence of wealth, that is fine. So therefore, that is fine. So you say, oh, there is absolutely no wealth element in the chart. That is fine. As long as your resource controls your hurting officer, then the hurting officer can generate, they can generate wealth. Therefore, that's where one can find that in the absence of wealth. And so in terms of feng shui activation, in terms of generating wealth, I think this is also quite common, that in terms of, we always activate noblemen. And therefore, likewise, in the absence of any wealth in the person's chart, and what we'll consider the activation for noblemen is also the activation for resource. And therefore, if the person has hurting officer, no wealth, therefore to activate resource is always used. And so that's activation of nobleman to then generate that resource controlling the hurting officer to produce wealth. So therefore that's rule number 10. Rule number 10. Right. Now the other part is also where we now look into number 11. Number 11, I think we also did have covered this before. What happens when a day master is weak? When a wealth is strong. So in the ancient reading, if the day master is weak with abundance of wealth, then this is the life of a servant, the life of a slave, where it's surrounded by money but cannot see. Therefore, that would be usually the negative reading, when a weak itself with abundance of wealth, where there's no officer and no indirect resource element, not too strong. But again, this is where now we want to check whether hurting officer and eating gods are present. And again, if it is present, then wealth can also be generated. Alright, so as we look into the generation for wealth that comes along to it. Now, as we take a look into number 13, rule number 13. And so this is where one will consider again, if wealth is missing, with a weak day master and no output or weak output. Therefore, this would be where the reading is per what it would read. It's marked by poverty. The consideration for marked by poverty, indicating that this person is sometimes considered to be greedy without talent. And greedy without talent can also be read as a gambler, Because when the day master is weak, the day master lacks the wealth. The desire for wealth is stronger. But somehow, in the absence of eating god and hurting officer, they then lack the talent in order to generate the wealth. And therefore, this person tend to have the indulgence or tend to lead towards trying to make money through gambling or through such activity as well. All right, but nonetheless, now here we do find that I think some of the rules tends to be repetitive. So maybe we don't really need 30 rules, but it's quite a long list here as well. Okay, other than that, we also see coming up to the next part is if the day master is rooted. So again, if the day master is weak, but if it is rooted. So therefore, if it is rooted, if it has a strong root, then again it's able to generate wealth. Generate wealth. That comes into it as well. In our rule number 16, I'm just going to jump to rule number 16. If the chart is one that has an officer structure or one that has a resource structure, in the absence of wealth, it can still consider substantial wealth, but usually this will be the part whereby the pathway is what we call use titles. Use titles. To use titles means to use your name, to use your, to use basically to use your status in order to generate wealth. Therefore, that's just how one can consider this all the same as well. All right, I'm just going to jump to a few ones and we're going to take a look. Now, next, of course, we want to consider that if you have a hurting officer or an element that is not restrained by the day master. Therefore, if the eating god and the hurting officer is the useful god and not restrained by the day master, sometimes in the absence of clash, in the absence of any clash. Oh, you have a question, huh? What does it yin? The yin actually means seal, huh? Yin. Yin is actually the seal. The seal is actually resource. Huh? Okay, Dewey, you just asked that. Therefore, we normally consider the resource. And the resource, of course, also means nobleman. So therefore, this would be the yin, the seal category, which also means nobleman and also officer staff. Okay, is that the yin that you're referring to? Yes, sir? Okay. All right. All right. So these rules comes in. There are 30 rules altogether. But of course, here it will be very painful to memorize all of them without. But once you truly understand the interaction of the 5 elements, all these rules can just come to be intuitive. Come to be intuitive. So again, we want to consider that the best scenario. So what would be the best you can have? The best you can have, of course, is when you and your wealth are strong. Simple, simple. So in the case of Larry Page, we can find that the day master is a strong day master, and then the month is a strong wealth. Okay, so in all simplicity, this is the best as far as money is concerned. Strong day master, strong wealth, amongst the richest in the world. But now suddenly the moment this becomes weak, then the reading turns unfavorable. To then mean a life of a servant, surrounded by money that you cannot see, money that you cannot touch. Therefore, the weekday master, then one of the rules just now mentioned that if it is rooted, that will be great. If it is rooted, then that will be great. If it is rooting, if there's a rooting, then it wouldn't be so weak. Then the day master is able to control the wealth. And then in another part, it says, now it says here in this rule, if you have strong officer, if you have stronger officer, because here the officer weakens, therefore that's where they come into say, if the day master is weak and the presence of wealth element, if the direct officer 7 killing elements are strong, therefore it can also achieve the wealth. And therefore this would be where the officer can weaken the wealth. As it weakens the wealth, then it's for the day master to be able to counter it. So therefore that's what we are trying to mean. So the reading at the end of the day is that to look into money, the first step is who is stronger, you or the wealth is strong. And preferably what we would want is that both to be strong. Now, if the day master is weak and the wealth is also weak, therefore very simple, we want resource. Again, as I mentioned just now, if you want resource, the resource strengthens the day master. as it strengthens the day master, then the day master will be stronger. Because at the end of the day, we want the day master to be stronger than the wealth. And so if the day master is stronger than the wealth, then the ability to make money is there. And in terms of missing wealth, then we'll look into output, because output can also produce wealth. That's the part of the reading there as well. Yeah, as it is. And so, if the day master is weak and wealth is missing, and there's no resource is damage. Damage here can mean weak, clash away in tombs and everything, therefore not going to be very favorable. Therefore, that's where the mention is. Now, rule number 21 is a little bit more towards saying that a young day master, whether you're male or female, would be better to make money. So in a way, we'll consider that young day master element, making money would be a greater prosperous life. Therefore, that's just what it means into number 3. All right. And so, of course, rule number 22 continues for it to say that as well. And so rule number 23 would be the same. If the day master is weak, the wealth is weak, then likewise the wealth element will not be favorable. And so here, officer. So we do consider that when officer stars are strong, an officer stars tends to weaken wealth. And in the event that there are no wealth, and so therefore one has to see that it can be accumulated with strong output to control the officer. A failure in which, of course, then it may be considered that it's not able to then generate wealth. All right, so these are just now coming to in play, all the various elements on how wealth can be supported. All right, that's just a quick one. So we're just going to run through some of them in looking at it as it is. Okay, now let's just take a look into number 27. So number 27. So when a wealth element serves as a useful god, when the wealth element serves as a useful god, if it is a useful god, the useful god should be supported. The useful god in the element should not be clashed. And therefore here, for wealth element denoted to be useful god, then it will be outlined that it's essential to have output. And if the output is weak or absent, then wealth will be harder to attain. And therefore, this will be where, again, the rule number 27 would call for the eating god to support it as well. All right. So as we run through the gamut, these are some of the rules that come from the chapter that can be read here as well. Yeah. Okay, finally, last but not least, we come to rule number 30. I'm just going to it'll be little time to run through all of them, but I find that out of the 30 rules, I think in my opinion, what I have observed is out of the 30 rules, there are many repetitive rules. They repeat itself to indicate a more meticulous or detailed definition or comprehensive measure, but actually that's to needless to go through all of them, but just to have a broad basic foundation of it, that would be good enough. Now the last one now here, as we come to wrap it up in the wealth structure for the Pachi chart. Here the chart calls for both, necessary for both yin and yang. So the yin and yang of the wealth style will be the direct wealth and the indirect wealth. Now, earlier when we look into officer, remember when we talk about officer style? In officer style, which is either direct officer or servant killing. Now, between the two of them, usually the general rule of thumb is we don't want to see both. We only want to see one of them. So for officer style, we want to see only one of them. If you have both, then it's confusion. But here, for wealth, we want to see both of them. We want to consider that we should see both of them. A chart that is auspicious will be a chart that has both of them. And that reasoning is, of course, direct wealth is about work. Direct wealth is about direct involvement in generating wealth. And while indirect wealth is about speculations and side deals. And so, of course, when you combine these two together, then we would then denote that the person would have multiple sources of income, multiple sources. And not just multiple sources of income, but the ability to dabble on both sides. That means when it's time to come to work, person is capable, and likewise when it's come to doing business, interact, the person is also fine. Therefore, usually we would want to consider that it's necessary to find both the yin and yang, to find both the direct and indirect wealth. Therefore, the one that is very good is normally one that has both, that comes into it. Therefore, that's where we often want to ask the question that whether you are able to see both or otherwise, as it is from all the chart. Therefore, we see indirect wealth and we also want to see direct wealth. But therefore, that would be usually a better welcoming part. But somehow we do find that these are some of the chart as we consider if we have both direct wealth and indirect. Now, anyway, all these charts that we shared today, it is missing of the hour pillar. And of course, making money, hour pillar is quite important or useful to come to predict. Because as you know, hour pillar denote whether the money that you make will carry you through your old age. Whether you still have money at the last stage of your life. And therefore, that would be difficult to measure if we do not have the complete chart for all these people. But if you have, then we're able to see the presence of both direct wealth and indirect wealth all the same as well. All right, so this will be the wrap up and the completion of our 3-part series. Yeah. So thank you. I'll see you somewhere in the future then again. Oh, one more question. We didn't talk about the growth. Oh, I think if it is a growth, I think that would be very useful because growth means I think the growth chart would actually denote that the person will continue to make money. So therefore, there's a growth chart. You'll find that this is yin, so this is a growth chart. So if it's a growth chart, normally we denote that the wealth will be increasing, increasing wealth as it is. All right. Okay. Right. So thank you for today's sharing as we come to the tail end of it. Good night, everyone. Thank you.